Live from London, this is BBC News. President-elect Trump nominates the vaccine skeptic and conspiracy theorist Robert Kennedy Jr. to be his health secretary. Summer slowdown, UK economy clocks in just 0.1% growth between July to September. An airstrike flattens a building bordering Beirut's southern suburbs as Israel steps up its bombardment. No longer fit for purpose, scientists and former political leaders say the UN climate talks are in need of an urgent overhaul. And the fourth and also the last supermoon of 2024 lights up the night sky in Hanoi, Vietnam. Hello, I'm Sarah Campbell. President-elect Donald Trump has continued to shock the political establishment in Washington by naming loyalists from the fringes of American politics to top jobs. Among the latest nominations, and perhaps the most controversial yet, is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a vaccine skeptic, for health secretary. Trump said RFK Jr. has a great mind. Mr. Trump made the announcement on his Truth Social platform, saying Mr. Kennedy will restore agencies to the traditions of gold standard scientific research and beacons of transparency to end the chronic disease epidemic and to make America great and healthy again. But there has already been a backlash. The executive director of the American Public Health Association says he and his organisation will absolutely oppose Donald Trump's appointment of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as health secretary. And let's remind ourselves of some of the other key announcements made in the last few days. Marco Rubio as Secretary of State, the former Democrat Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence, and the controversial appointment of Matt Gaetz as Attorney General. Several of the posts will require Senate approval. Our correspondent Rowan Bridge has the latest.
America could soon have a vaccine skeptic who repeated COVID-19 conspiracy theories running its health department. Robert Kennedy Jr. comes from Democratic Party royalty. His uncle was President John F. Kennedy and his father was Attorney General. Mr. Kennedy made his own name as an environmental lawyer and activist, but that's been overshadowed by his controversial views on vaccines.
Do I want children to get measles? Of course I don't have.
So why do you spread this doubt?
Because when I'm asking you to be responsible and ask the question.
The questions are being asked. The
No,
vaccines are safe.
The vaccines are safe from what? Do vaccines cause autoimmune disease? I'm in court right now arguing.
There's no evidence they do.
Well, there's plenty of evidence that they do. You're just not looking at it.
Last year, he launched an independent bid for the presidency before dropping out and throwing his weight behind Donald Trump. He was one of the speakers at Mr. Trump's New York rally, where he condemned the party his family had dedicated their lives to.
Today's Democratic Party is the party of war. It's the party of the CIA. You had Kamala Harris giving a speech at the Democratic Convention that was written by neocons, that was belligerent, pugnacious, that talked about the domination of the world by the United States through our weapons of war. It's the party today that wants to divide Americans. It's the party that is dismantling women's sports by letting men play women's sports. It's the party of Wall Street. It's the party of Bill Gates, who just gave $50 million to Kamala Harris.
His loyalty to the Trump cause has now been rewarded. In a speech at his Mar-a-Lago resort, the president-elect praised Mr. Kennedy.
I just looked at the news reports. People like you, Bobby. Don't get too popular, Bobby. Oh. You know, you've reached about the level. Now, we want you to come up with things and ideas and what you've been talking about for a long time, and I think you're going to do some unbelievable thing. Nobody's going to be able to do it like you, and boy, does he feel it in his heart. So congratulations also to your family.
During his campaign, Donald Trump said he would let Robert Kennedy go wild when it comes to the nation's health. Mr. Trump vowed to shake up the establishment. This latest pic shows he plans to do just that. Rowan Bridge, BBC News, Washington.
Well, I spoke to Lord Kim Darroch, former UK ambassador to the US, about the Trump picks, and he said that naming vaccine skeptic RFK Jr. for health secretary was the wildest announcement so far.
This guy is an anti-vaxxer who has said that he believes that vaccines cause autism, and he's a conspiracy theorist. And putting him in charge of the health department, I mean, I always thought he would get a job. Trump more or less promised it, but I thought it would be something outside the government machinery. But now he's actually in charge of the health department machinery. So it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Yeah, it has to be nominated by the Senate.
It has to be approved by the Senate, although there are ways around that by putting the Senate into recess, but they're seldom used. But the Senate will have a challenge with a number of these appointments, and some of them already being criticised. And Trump will feel that with Republican majorities in both houses, he would say on the coattails of his election victory that the Senate should simply approve his nominations because he's the guy who got them their majority, and he's now in charge, and this is what he wants to do. So it'll be quite a clash if the Senate really does attempt to block any of these appointments.
Yeah, let's look at some of the implications outside of the United States, some of the other people that Trump has nominated. Let's start with his pick for US ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, a nomination which has certainly been welcomed by the far right in Israel. What would you say, or how would you say this might change the way the US has approached Israel, Gaza and the conflict with Lebanon?
Mike Huckabee is an evangelical Christian, so in a sense, Trump is looking towards that community who voted for him from the election and saying, one of yours is going to do this important job. He's the father of Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who was the press secretary in Trump's first term. He is absolutely committed and total supporter of Israel, to the extent that he basically thinks that, he has said publicly, there is no such thing as a Palestinian, and has implied that he would support Israel annexing the whole of the West Bank and Gaza as Israeli territory. So he's right out there in the same place as the far right in Israeli politics. But we shouldn't overstate the importance of an ambassadorial job. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, will be in charge of policy on this, underneath, of course, the White House, and I would expect Donald Trump to take a very close interest in issues like this. He was the strongest supporter of Israel in his first term, moved the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I think he'll be, phone lines to Netanyahu, Trump Netanyahu, they'll be much used over the next 4 years.
Yeah, you mentioned Marco Rubio. Of course, we've seen Antony Blinken, the current Secretary of State, travelling to the Middle East numerous times over the last year to try and broker a ceasefire there. How do you think Marco Rubio might approach the job?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm not aware that Rubio has said anything very definitive about what he thinks, except he is, again, a very strong supporter of Israel, and has supported the Israeli military operation in Gaza. So he's already out there, in that sense, giving more or less unconditional support to Israel. Obviously, Trump and his administration would like to do something that stopped the fighting there. Trump has said that on the campaign trail. So I think Rubio will undertake some diplomacy there. He will go there. I'm not sure that I can see this administration putting as much pressure on the Netanyahu government as the Biden administration has tried to, although all that's been ineffective. Honestly, I can't see much change in what is happening in the Middle East as a result of the change of administration in the US, but you can always expect the unexpected with Donald Trump.
That was Lord Kim Darroch, former UK ambassador to the US, talking to me a little earlier. The Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, has called for Britain to rebuild relations with the EU while respecting the decision of the British people to leave the bloc. In a speech in the City of London, he said Brexit had weighed on the economy. Our economics editor, Faisal Islam, reports.
There have been many reasons why the British economy has been sluggish in recent years. Extra goods trade barriers with our nearest neighbours after Brexit haven't helped, and the government says it wants to do something about them. But when Britain's top financiers gathered in the City of London to hear the famous Mansion House address from the Chancellor and the Bank of England Governor, Andrew Bailey went further than he has before on this topic.
Now, I've said many times as a public official, I take no position on Brexit per se, and that's very important. But I do have to point out consequences. The changing trading relationship with the EU has weighed on the level of potential supply. The impact on trade seems to be more in goods than services, which I don't think is particularly surprising. But it underlines why we must be alert to and welcome opportunities to rebuild relations while respecting that very important decision of the British people.
Well, those opportunities are coming. Spain's finance minister is meeting the Chancellor today. He told the BBC a better relationship could be struck, for example, on travel and work for young people. Can a better deal be done? Would you encourage the British government to look at a closer relationship?
Undoubtedly. I think we need to be positive here and optimistic that a better deal can be actually closed on that front. As you said, there was a very close movement, very intense movement in terms of young people travelling both from between EU and UK, and I think again there's a lot of room for improvement there, and hopefully we can find a way for that.
The word tariff, properly used, is a beautiful word.
But the arrival of a new US president with plans to tax all incoming trade creates a new dilemma.
The Governor of the Bank of England is normally rather shy to talk about Brexit, but he will see this as a statement of the economic reality rather than any sort of political intervention. But it comes at a sensitive time. If the stated plans of the incoming Trump administration to apply a blanket tariff to all imports does cause some sort of global trade war, many fear the UK will have to make a choice between closer trade relations with Europe or Trump's United States of America.
The message from the Chancellor is that the UK might be able to have it both ways.
I look forward to working closely with President-elect Trump and his team to strengthen our relationship in the years ahead. And of course, our biggest trading partner is the European Union. We will not be reversing Brexit or re-entering the single market or customs union. But we must reset our relationship.
Rachel Reeves also promised to boost the financial industry, saying that some regulations seeking to prevent crisis had gone too far, as she looks over the Channel and over the Atlantic at the same time for how to boost the economy. Faisal Islam, BBC News.
Well, the UK's economy grew by 0.1% between July and September, according to the latest official figures. Growth was lower than expected, and the Office for National Statistics said activity was subdued across most industries during those 3 months. Our business correspondent Mark Ashdown talked me through the numbers.
I mean, it was a really strong start to the year. We had a couple of good quarters of growth, and now it seems to have sort of spluttered, all gone a bit flat. GDP, of course, is a sort of temperature test, really, for the economy, how fast it's growing or not. We get monthly and we get quarterly figures. Now, the monthly ones do tend to sort of jump around a bit. So September dipped into reverse, overall went into negative growth. But it's the quarterly ones. You get 4 readings over the course of the year, which are the key. If you look at that chart now, which has just popped up there very handily, back end of last year, look, we had 2 consecutive negative quarters of growth. That's the red blocks. That means we officially entered a recession, but pretty quickly bounced out. As you can see, the start of this year was quite strong there, wasn't it? 0.7% and 0.5%. So as I say, we've spluttered a bit.
So why the dip?
Well, various factors. The budget, in a word, really. I think leading up to the budget, there was all that doom and gloom, wasn't there? Businesses put investment on hold, hiring, expansion, and consumers sort of dried up the spending, really, as everyone was sort of a little bit worried about what might be in the budget. So it's a bit sort of doom and gloom, really. The general pathway overall, though, is still looking like 1% growth this year, expected then to sort of accelerate in 2026. A lot of that budget detail was front-loaded, a lot of big spending up front, but then growth should tail off after that, unfortunately, into the sort of end of the decade.
And we know that the Chancellor has put the emphasis on growth. You know, this is a government for growth.
Yep.
So this doesn't sort of fit the headlines.
Not really, no. I mean, she was talking last night, Rachel Reeves, the governor of the Bank of England, though, Andrew Bailey. He grabbed the headlines really saying, articulating really, for the first time, or the strongest he's ever done really, the sort of impact of Brexit or some of these trade barriers. He said we need to start being alert for the chances to build closer ties while, of course, respecting the referendum vote. I mean, of course, entering stage left is Donald Trump, talking trade, tariffs, 20% potentially on US imports. What impact will that have as well? Behind the scenes, there's a suggestion possibly the UK may have to make a decision. Do we get closer to the EU or closer to the US? Certainly looking across the world, Labour's mission is to have the fastest growth in the G7 leading economies. They're the big players really in global markets. The target's a bit sketchy by the end of the Parliament, they're saying. If we look at it today, we're now second, just behind the US, still ahead of Canada, France, Italy, Japan and Germany, but certainly work to do. I think the government wants a sort of highway, tailwinds pushing us, accelerating towards growth. I think at the moment I describe it as more like a sort of cobbled side street, a few brambles in the way still.
That was our business correspondent, Mark Ashdown. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. Welcome back to Spain now, because the head of the regional government of Valencia has admitted to mistakes in the handling of the deadly floods at the end of October and has apologised for the response. You're looking at live pictures of people protesting as he has been addressing the local parliament this morning. Carlos Mazón has been heavily criticised for not sending out warnings after a red alert was issued by the Spanish Meteorological Agency. At least 220 people died, and last weekend tens of thousands of people took to the streets of Valencia demanding he resign. Airstrikes have hit the southern suburbs of Beirut in the past few hours, sending plumes of smoke into the sky. It comes after an Israeli airstrike on an emergency response centre in the city of Baalbek in northeastern Lebanon on Thursday night, which killed at least 12 rescue workers. The strike hit a building of the Civil Defence Agency, which is linked to the Lebanese government and not affiliated with the Iranian-backed group Hezbollah. The Israeli military has not commented on the attack. In the more recent strikes in southern Beirut, Israeli drones fired 2 missiles at the Beirut suburb of Goberi before the Air Force carried out what was described as a very heavy strike that levelled a building near municipal offices. It followed a warning of imminent strikes issued by the Israeli military on X. I've been speaking to the BBC's Hugo Bashega, who's in Beirut, and he began by giving me more details about that attack in Baalbek.
This attack hit a building that was being used by the Civil Defence Agency. This is an agency that is linked to the Lebanese government. It is not affiliated with Hezbollah. And the Lebanese Health Ministry reacted to the attack, calling it a barbaric attack by the Israeli military. Again, there hasn't been any reaction from the Israeli authorities. One of the victims in that attack was the head of the Civil Defence Agency in the region of Baalbek, Bilal Raad, who had become well known here here in the country. We here at the BBC interviewed him a number of times during this war. And what the Lebanese authorities are saying is that these attacks have killed more than 180 emergency and medical workers across the country in recent weeks as this conflict between Israel and Hezbollah escalated. And we're seeing now that in recent days the Israeli military has intensified its airstrikes across the country. This morning, new attacks here in Beirut, the fourth consecutive day of attacks hitting this city. And this is happening amid new efforts to try to reach a ceasefire here in this conflict. Yesterday, American officials delivered a letter with a proposal for a ceasefire to the Lebanese authorities. We've seen some indications from Hezbollah that the group is interested in reaching a ceasefire here in this conflict. But what Hezbollah has been saying and what Lebanese authorities have been saying is that they will only agree to a deal that is based on the terms of the United Nations Resolution 1701, which is the resolution that ended the 2006 conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. It requires Hezbollah to remove its fighters and weapons from areas near the border with Israel. But one sticking point in these talks that have been happening is that Israel wants the right to act inside Lebanon should any deal be violated, something that the authorities here consider unacceptable. So this seems to be the first step of what is likely to be a very difficult and long process for a ceasefire.
That was Hugo Bashega in Beirut. South Africa's government says it won't help a group of illegal miners inside a closed mine in the country's northwest province who've been denied basic access to basic supplies as part of an official strategy against illegal mining. Located in Stilfontein, the police closed off the entrances used to transport their supplies underground, and they are believed to be suffering from a lack of food, water and other necessities. Our correspondent Nomsa Maseko told us more about the situation.
It is turning out to be a humanitarian situation at this stage because the police and the military have been putting together an operation whereby they have been trying to shut down disused mine shafts. But because of the high unemployment rate, and it's mostly some of the people that are going underground are people who are sacked from the mines that they were working in. Others are undocumented migrants, literally trying to make ends meet. So what has happened in the last couple of weeks is that water and food and other necessities have been shut down. Nothing has been allowed underground. People have been saying that they have been eating literally toothpaste and vinegar just to to keep alive, and that many of the people that are underground, even though it started out as a situation of people refusing to get out of the mine shaft because they did not want to be arrested, they are now apparently too weak and too frail to even be able to do that themselves. That is why there are now volunteers here who have gathered. In fact, just on my right as well, there are tents that have been put up. Families as well have been staying put here because there are some relatives who are on the surface saying that they know that their husbands or brothers are still underground, and they are wanting to know whether they are alive and safe and that they will be able to be retrieved and come out.
That was Nomsa Maseko there reporting from Stilfontein. Scientists and former political leaders say the UN climate talks are no longer fit for purpose and need urgent overhaul. They want countries hosting future COP talks to be committed to phasing out fossil fuels and for summits to be smaller and more frequent. This follows remarks from the Azerbaijani president, who told world leaders gathered in his country for COP29 that natural gas was a gift from God. An official also appeared to try to arrange a meeting to discuss fossil fuel deals. Well, our climate editor Justin Rolat, who is in Baku, told us more about the letter.
So these are really senior people. There's scientists and lots of other luminaries among them who are upset, as you say, by Azerbaijan's conduct at these talks, that reference to fossil fuels being a gift from God, which is unusual way to open a conference designed to get the world to kind of tackle the climate issue. And that story that I did about the chief executive of COP29. And yeah, they're saying they need these big reforms. And I think when you look at the reforms, smaller conferences happening more often, more focused on delivery, countries that are committed to reducing fossil fuels hosting them, they all sound very sensible. Countries held to account for the promises they make. They all sound really sensible until you remember that this is designed to be a multilateral process, drawing in every nation on Earth, drawing in nations of all sorts of different opinions on fossil fuels, all sorts of different positions, if you like, in the economy, producers, consumers, everybody is drawn in here. And the idea is that even if you're sceptical, you're part of the process and you're drawn in, you begin to discuss the issue and begin hopefully to recognise this is a huge global challenge. It's going to affect every country in the world. We all need to be part of the solution. So that's the hope, and some of the things that they're talking about appear to run a bit contrary to that idea of a big open forum where everyone comes in, whatever their views. So I think that has caused a little bit of upset it's caused quite a bit of upset in the UN here, and I think the indicator of how they feel is the words that Simon Steele, the current head of the UN climate process, used when he opened this conference. He said, yeah, there are problems, not happening fast enough, we need to be more focused on delivery, but COP is working. And he said, look, the forecasts were temperatures would rise by 5 degrees Celsius. They're now going to rise by 3 degrees Celsius. That's still a catastrophic level of warming, but he would say there is progress. Not fast enough, but there is progress.
That was Justin Rolat reporting from Baku. I just want to finish this half hour with pictures from Vietnam. This is the supermoon, the fourth and final supermoon of the year. Seeing there in Vietnam, soon to be moving over to Karachi, and I think being seen here a little later on today. What a view to leave you with. Stay with us on BBC News.